Already, they are helping scientists answer basic questions. How will this era of the stars play out? And what lies beyond? For researchers like Paul Woodward, the first landmark will be the fate of stars like the Sun.
You can think about the Sun's evolution as a fight against gravity. Gravity is what holds the Sun together. It's constantly pulling the material of the Sun inward. But the Sun doesn't all just fall in because it's burning hydrogen in its center, in its core. That energy generates pressure that holds the Sun up against gravity.
But when that hydrogen runs out, the Sun will partially collapse, and its core will begin to heat up, reaching temperatures of 100 million degrees. That spells the beginning of the end.
Earth would start getting hotter and hotter. The oceans would come to a slow rolling boil, and they begin to evaporate.
For humans and other creatures still alive on planet Earth, things will begin to get intolerable. The only question is when.
They say that if you have a frog and it's in water and you just gradually raise the water temperature, the frog won't jump out and it will just cook. Who knows? Maybe the same will happen to us. The Sun's temperature gradually increases, and we never find any particular moment when we should leave, essentially jump off this planet, and then we just cook. It could happen.
Just a tiny rise in temperature to a mere 140 degrees would cause all water to evaporate and turn the Earth into a desert. We will be cooking then.
This is a scary time. What we'd have to be doing by then is looking at some of the outer planets. Those places that we know today are a little too cold to live on, well, maybe they'll become just right. Let's put our sights on those planets and start pitching tent to give us a place to live the day that happens.
Clearly, we'll have to find a way to save ourselves, or our planet. We may have no choice but to turn to Fred Adams' plan.
The most obvious one is simply to build space stations and move into space, because we're already building space stations, so by billions of years from now that might become technologically feasible. The other interesting possibility would be to actually try to engineer the solar system and move the planets around. You can in principle do that by steering asteroids or other large bodies into the proper orbits so that they gravitationally scatter off of the planets and move them around in the process.
Adams has actually worked out the trajectories necessary to tug the Earth away from the Sun. An asteroid, nudged into position, would exert enough gravitational force to gradually move our planet to safety. The need for such extraordinary measures may arise sooner than we think. Some speculate that the Earth has in fact already gone through 90% of its habitable lifespan. But there is an even more dangerous phase ahead. Some 5 billion years in the future, the Sun will begin to roil. Its core will shrink as its surface pushes farther and farther outward, swelling to an enormous size, becoming a red giant.
That would make for some interesting sunrises. The Sun would rise as half the sky. The Sun would come up into the middle of the sky and would occupy most of the visible space of the daytime sky.
The red giant Sun will shine 10,000 times brighter than it does today. What will happen down on Earth?
The Sun would continue to get larger and larger and larger. It would become so large that it would engulf the entire orbit of Mercury, the entire orbit of Venus, and the entire orbit of Earth. We would be this ember orbiting within the outer surface of the Sun. This is not stable because we'll be plowing through solar material, which would eat up our orbital energy, and we would spiral down into the center until we ended our life as an evaporated puff of smoke.
the sun's red giant phase will decimate our planetary neighborhood. And yet, an even larger event is looming, one that will radically reshape the entire galaxy. This is the final hope for life in a galaxy heading for oblivion.
The day will come where all the stars in the galaxy are no longer replenished with new stars because we've run out of gas. You've made your last star, and then the stars begin to burn out. It's as though someone turns off switches one by one. If you looked at the Milky Way galaxy from afar, it slowly begins to get dimmer and dimmer as the dying stars are not replenished, and eventually the galaxy fades away.
The era of stars has come to an end.